So here we start the passive voice. And there is a difference between the passive voice and the active voice. If you think of the word passive, you think of something that's just happens to you. You didn't have a choice in doing the action. You just sat there and it happened to you. And the passive voice and the active voice is the same thing. So this is a really nice website that I found that explains it very well. Passive voice. The bottle was recycled by Joe. That Joe, lovely fella. He the bottle is the key part of that sentence. The bottle was recycled by Joe. The bottle didn't have any action at all. It was just sitting there and Joe came and picked it up. So the bottle was moved. And you'll notice that there's two parts to the verb was recycled. Poor bottle didn't know what hit it. The active voice, Joe is doing the doing. Joe recycled the bottle. One action word, one verb. Joe recycled the bottle. And that's active. Joe is doing the acting. He has picked it up. He's going to recycle it. He's going to put it in the recycling bin. Whereas the passive, the bottle was just sitting there and it just all of a sudden got picked up and moved. It happened to the bottle. So there's passive and there's active. Some more examples. Passive. I was shushed by the librarian. I was shushed by the librarian. I was just sitting there. I was just doing whatever. Maybe I was singing, maybe I was humming. And then I was shushed. Two verbs. It's passive. It happened to me. Active voice, the librarian shushed me. That's what happened. The librarian did the acting. The librarian came up and shushed me. Another example. The crime scene was monitored by local police officers. Was monitored. Two parts to the verb. Passive. The crime scene is just there. It's not doing anything at all. It was being monitored. Active voice. Local police officers monitored. That is them doing the job. They monitored the crime scene. There are some times when using passive voice is a must. You have no choice. So, for instance, the doer of the action is unknown. The bank was robbed on Tuesday. Now that I'm looking at these examples, we have a lot of crime in here. The bank was robbed. So the bank is just doing a bank thing, it's just sitting there, it's just standing around, and it was robbed on Tuesday. I don't know who the robbers are, so I can't attribute the action. I can't say Sally and George robbed the bank. I don't know who the robbers were. Part of robbing a bank is your identity is hidden. So the bank was robbed on Tuesday. I don't have any choice but to use the passive voice there. Or when the doer of the action is irrelevant. The Empire State Building was completed in 1931. There were probably thousands and thousands of people who went into building the Empire State Building in New York. I can't thank them all and attribute the action to all of them. The Empire State Building was completed in 1931. It doesn't matter who did the completing here, because really we're talking about this iconic building, the Empire State Building, and the fact doesn't need to know who built it. So the passive voice is okay there. Another reason you might use the passive voice was that your focus is on the object rather than the subject or the doer. Pesticides were discovered in 80% of supermarket fruit by researchers at NYU or New York University. Pesticides were discovered. That's the key part of that story. You don't need to know that it was me that discovered it. It wasn't me, by the way. You don't need to know the name of the researchers who discovered the pesticides. That's not the important part. The important part is they were discovered. You need to wash your fruit at the when you buy it at the supermarket. So if you're reading in the newspaper, the headline would be that pesticides were discovered. That's really important. So the passive voice is okay there, that they were discovered. And this is when you're trying to manipulate somebody, perhaps. You want to be deliberately vague about responsibility. Mistakes were made. So you'll often see politicians or someone who doesn't exactly want to bring blame onto themselves. They have to say that mistakes were made. They have to be able to tell the public that somebody was wrong. They don't necessarily want to say that it was themselves. And so they might say, mistakes were made. Okay, that's passive. It's a little manipulative too, instead of saying, I made that mistake. So these are some reasons that the passive voice is okay to use, and you can expect them to be used. But for the most part, we really want to use the active voice in our writing. So I'm going to take you to another spot here. Pardon me for a moment. There we go. Active and passive voice. We want to know usually the subject of your sentence, and then we want to have a verb. We discussed last week about having complete sentences, nouns, and our verbs, or the subject and the predicate that follows. We want to know who the doer of the action is for the most part, because in most of the writing that we're doing, we want that clarity. We really don't want extra words, and we don't want to be passive. We want to be active in our writing. Here are some more examples that show that the subject is doing that verb's action. The man must have eaten 5 hamburgers. Marilyn mailed the letter. Colorful parrots live in the rainforest. The man is doing the eating, Marilyn is doing the mailing, parrots are doing the living. In the passive voice, it focuses on the object. 5 hamburgers must have been eaten by the man. I don't know why we need the 5 hamburgers, why we need to know their take on it, why we need to have their perspective. The letter was mailed by Marilyn. Again, the letter is not the important part. We don't want to know about the letter's perspective. Marilyn mailing the letter, she mailed the letter, is more direct, and it gives us the information that we need. I'm just making sure that there's none of this that I want to speak with you here before I send you to do some exercises. So this exercise, and I will link you to it, tells you how you can rearrange them. But rearranging really isn't the important part so much as we're trying our best to use the active voice as much as possible in our writing in order to be clear. So I'm going to show you some exercises, and I'm going to show it to you right now, actually, so you can see what's coming up. They often listen to music. Is that active or passive? How do we know? You can look at the amount of verbs, and you can look to see if the doer is doing the action or if action is happening to the object. They often listen to music. They listen to music. Well, that sounds pretty active to me. She is reading the newspaper now. Well, she is doing it. Had it been passive, it would be the newspaper is being read. But she is doing the action. She is reading the newspaper now. So that's active. These cars are produced in Japan. Now it's getting a little bit trickier. I see that it's the cars. They're being produced. Oh, wait, they are being produced? So maybe Japan produces the cars. Japan is doing the action. The cars aren't doing any of the action. It's happening to them. So I would say that's passive. Alan teaches geography. Natasha LeBlanc teaches writing. I'm doing the action. Alan is doing the action. So that should be active. German is spoken in Austria. Austrians speak German. I'm going to put that down as passive. Lots of houses were destroyed by the earthquake in 1906. That sounds like it happened to the houses. The earthquake did the doing. So I'm going to say that as passive too. Henry Ford invented the assembly line. That's him doing the doing. He invented it. That sounds active. The bus driver was hurt yesterday. That sounded like it happened to him. What hurt him? The bus driver hurt. My feelings is the bus driver doing the doing. But if he was hurt, it sounds like something did the action to him. So I'm going to say that that's passive. You should open your workbook. You need to do the opening. You're doing the action. That sounds active to me. Houses have been built. That sounds the same as mistakes have been made. Houses have been built. That sounds passive. They're not doing anything. So we'll do this together. We'll see if we can check the answers. Oh, thank goodness. That would have been really embarrassing if I didn't get them all right and I'm trying to teach you how to do them. So your activities will be like this, where I'm asking you to decide if they're active or passive. And I will also be asking you to write some active sentences or to rewrite some passive sentences that should be in the active voice. Good luck, everybody.